Love, dating, marriage is an issue of great concern for many, but in particular, from what I've noticed in Muslim society, who view marriage as almost an essential aspect of life. Yet this is quite complex, and it's a totally different concept if you are a disabled person. And there are many factors to consider, and I'll be sort of focusing later on one aspect. But if we start to briefly look at things such as society's perception and attitude, people often think that those with disabilities lead a pretty sheltered lives. They presume that disability means someone is unable to be adventurous, to be active and have an exciting, busy life, and to not have the same needs or emotional feelings that an able-bodied person has. Plus, that there is this great belief that a disabled person needs help and care, so you are viewed as someone who will burden your life rather than enrich it. And that is sort of the general view of society. And I do mean general, doesn't mean that everyone has the same belief, but it is the majority. And this kind of leads to the fact that our views and our perception are formed largely by literature and films and media. I can't think of any book that I've read that shows a person with disability in a positive, I wouldn't say positive, because positive doesn't mean realistic. I always see disabled people trying to be very positive, and they hide things because they feel that this is the way to be, that to encourage people to think differently about disabled, then we have to be very positive and hide things because we think that this is not something that people want to hear. So there was a big, not attack, but criticism of a film that came out a couple of years ago, which was originally by, it was a book by Jojo Moyes, Me Before You. And it showed a person with disability who became disabled at a later stage of his life and became paralyzed, and chose to end his life because he didn't want to be a burden on the person that he loves. Again, this is a view. It might be realistic in some cases, but it's a dangerous path to go in, because you're basically giving the idea that a disabled person cannot be in a relationship because they will always be a burden on the person with them. Again, we have another positive example, but this is a film that goes way back in the, I think, early 90s, which is Four Weddings and a Funeral, where you have a person with hearing impairment, and it's actually an actor with hearing impairment, not someone pretending to be, which is the case in all the films. And he's shown as active, living a full life, which does happen in real life as well. I think what many people don't realize is that people with disability are active, are sexually active. They do have relationships. There are dating apps for people with disability. There are many sites that people with disability use to go on dates. Some choose to stick to sites that are just for disabled people, for fear of being rejected. While others, no, they will opt to go on the main dating sites, but they might hide their disability because they will not get any clicks or anyone viewing their profile. And this is an issue again about about self-confidence. And if you love yourself, then others will get interested in you. There is a person who's written an article about how he always used to hide his disability, and he ended up going on endless dates where it's just a waste of time, because he eventually gets rejected because of he's a wheelchair user. And so he decided, no, I am going to put my wheelchair on my profile so he doesn't go through this whole waste of time. And now he's in a happy relationship, and he's dating, and he's happy. Again, there's if we go back to school, there is a lack of sex and relationship education tailored to disabled people. For example, made accessible to people with learning difficulties, or taking into account physical impairment. Because again, it's not just the wider society, but even people with disability. When you're young, you don't think that this is possible. You see yourself as limited, and there is no guidance or someone to show you that no, it is possible to go out with other people, to have a relationship, to be sexually active, to get married, to have kids. This is not talked about, not taught, or anything like that. Another aspect is that sexual health is a problem. If you're a woman, and whether you have kids or you're sexually active or you're married, etc., you cannot have a smear test. You get a letter saying to you, you need to have your smear test. But how logistic is it for you to have a smear test? Most GPs don't have a hoist. Most hospitals don't have a hoist, unless it's a very, very big hospital. And from my experience, I've never been to a hospital that does actually have hoist. Maybe two that and I've been to many hospitals in my life. And even if there is a hoist, two people need to control the hoist. There isn't enough staff to go around for people to do this. So recently there's been a petition that attracted more than 150,000. It was launched by a disabled mother of two who is at risk of having cervical cancer because she's never had a smear test. And she's urging the NHS to consider this, because there are approximately 13 million disabled people in the UK. Half of them are women. And these people are at risk of cancer because of one simple reason: there's no hoist and there isn't enough staff. And even if you can have it at home, nurses don't come out to do it at home. So that's another issue. And also, what many people don't realize is that studies have shown that disabled women are twice as likely to experience gender-based violence than non-disabled women. 1 in 6 disabled women have experienced abusive relationship. It's an issue for all women, but it's more difficult for a woman with disability because you're more dependent. There isn't enough. There's a shortage of women's refuge which are accessible and which could tell your needs. So you're basically stuck in a relationship that you can't get out because you are dependent on this person, because you feel that this person has sacrificed something to be with you. Again, it goes back to not loving yourself enough, to lacking confidence, and for logistic reasons, such as that even police stations are not accessible for you to go and report it. Having said that, there are positive examples. Unfortunately, most of the positive examples that I have seen are of non-ethnic minorities. There is a guy called Shane Booker. He's 26, and he was born with muscular dystrophy, muscular atrophy, which is a degeneration of the muscles. And he set up a YouTube channel to show people how it is possible to have a relationship with an able-bodied person. And he basically documents his everyday activities, his out with his girlfriend, his lifestyle on YouTube, and he's got millions of followers. But again, these are all sort of examples of non-Muslim, non-ethnic minorities, and I think we do have a problem within our society, within our community, that I've often heard people say marriage is half of your deen, is that you're not a complete Muslim unless you are married and you've had children, which I've always had a problem with, because I think people don't really understand the difference between teaching of Islam and their inherited cultural idea and traditions, and the importance they recognize every individual in their own right, whether they have a partner or not, because on Judgment Day you'll be questioned about your action and what you've done, rather than, you know, your wealth or your children or job or whatever. It's the funny thing with it as well is that there's like factors that you need, that people think you need to have to get married, which is equalities between partners in physical ability and health, and that's why people with disability are largely excluded from this notion, because people assume that there's that if you have a disability, then you should marry someone who is like you, because there's a belief that, you know, one should be equal to another. If you're disabled, people assume that your children will be disabled, or if they will have complex health issues, that you won't be able to perform your marital duties, etc. And all these beliefs limits the notion that people could integrate fully. And the funny thing is, again, in our society, is that we have this arranged marriage attitude, which is, if you have a disabled daughter or a son, it's arranged that you have a swap with other families. So, like, you know, we'll give you our son, but you have to take our disabled daughter, and you give us this kind of thing, which might solve a problem in that, you know, that this disabled person is getting married, but it's this notion that you need to that this person is not a complete person if they are not married, which is something that we need to move away from, because it's not. I personally don't believe that a marriage has anything to do with your faith or religion. It's a choice in life. If it works for you, good. If it doesn't, then it doesn't have to be an element of your religion or of your womanhood or manhood. It's a view of life that you believe in and that you have to follow. But the most important thing at the end of the day is to love yourself. And in loving yourself, you know the choice that you make in life. Thank you.